What's up guys, Jay here and welcome back to another video. Today we are going to be diving back into official build crafting and going over some strong build setups. So far I have done one build video covering a Greenbeard build for the engineer that is perfect for newcomers to pick up. This time however we are channeling our inner pyromaniac and talking about a driller build that focuses on just setting the entire world on fire. So if you guys are ready, let's dive into my appropriately named pyromaniac build for the driller class in Deep Rock Galactic. By the way, if you want to see more build videos or just more videos in general, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss another upload.
If it ain't drillable, it's probably flammable.
This build is definitely a lot more advanced than the last one I did. It's going to require a good amount of playtime, that way you can get access to what you need in order to make this build possible. The two things you need to make this build function are to have unlocked the Colette Wave Cooker secondary weapon and to acquire the Face Melter overclock for the driller's flamethrower. Face Melter is the core of this build setup, so it takes precedence over the Wave Cooker, and we'll go over it in more detail when we get to the gameplay and setup sections. Again, keep in mind that the recommendations that I give should not be viewed as the absolute undisputed choices for this build, but rather as a general guide to help you understand the build a little bit better. As such, feel free to experiment with certain tweaks to the upgrade choices if you find one that works better for you. Lastly, this build is intended to be used for hazard level 3 to 4 content. If you want to expose yourself to some higher difficulty content, then this will work well for you. And if you want to push yourself to hazard level 5, you absolutely can, but you might have to tweak your playstyle just a little bit. So now let's get into the gameplay of this particular build and how it's meant to be used. This build has one primary objective: to set the entire world and all enemies ablaze. The driller has a lot of elemental capabilities in his arsenal, and this build is about leaning into the hotter end of the spectrum. It allows you to be flexible in terms of doing both very strong single target damage and strong area control. As you can probably assume, this build uses the flamethrower as its primary weapon, as it is extremely adept at burning enemies to a crisp very easily. It is the centerpiece of this build, and all facets of this build revolve around setting the burning effect on enemies and improving the burning effect as much as possible. Your main method of using the flamethrower in this build is to disintegrate trash bugs almost instantly with the amount of flames we are shooting out thanks to the Face Melter. For taking out bigger and badder bug targets, you want to angle the flames, that way you not only hit the target but also pierce through it and leave sticky flames on the ground to apply even more damage in the process. While this build focuses more on direct heat damage and not sticky flame damage, it still does a great deal of damage to stronger targets. To assist in burning targets, especially the stronger, tougher ones, for our secondary we are running the Colette Wave Cooker. The Wave Cooker helps us round out a few loose ends with this build and allows us to further increase our damage to a good extent. The Flamethrower, especially with the Face Melter, does not have too much range to it, so the Wave Cooker helps to compensate for this since it technically has infinite range. Also, the use of its temperature amplifier and exothermic reactor mods can make our flames even more potent. You want to apply the burning effect to the enemy in question, and then the Wave Cooker can lengthen or increase the effectiveness of the debuff. We'll go over the full list of mods and overclocks in the loadout breakdown, but just keep in mind that the Wave Cooker is helping us accelerate the process, but is not absolutely necessary for the build to function properly. If you have the good overclocks for the Subata or EPC and want to use those instead, feel free to adjust the build to your best comfort level. So now, going into the actual loadout of the build, first we have our perk choices. For this build, since we are going to be up close and personal with the bugs most of the time, we want to have the ability to stay alive as much as possible and mitigate our downtime. For passive perks, my first choice was of course Vampire. This is fantastic for the driller specifically, and in this build it really shows off well. There are so many times where you are within melee range for a power attack to help keep you topped off. On the same lines, we are running Sweet Tooth to maximize the red sugar you find in the caves as best you can. You want to be as healthy as possible at all times, and this helps out a lot. Finally, to round it out, we have Thorns for some extra help with those annoying swarmer enemies. Again, you're going to be close to the enemies more often than not, so you want as many ways as possible to keep the pressure off of you, and dealing damage to the enemy is another way to do that. For active perks, you want similar options that help keep you alive or safe. Iron Will is a good first pick as it pairs very well with Vampire and can help save you at a pinch if you do go down. The other choice can depend on whether or not you're playing solo or with a group. If you're playing by yourself, you can never go wrong with Dash, as it gives you great mobility and can help you get out of a bad situation quickly. If playing with a group, Field Medic is a great choice, especially if running Iron Will, as it can give you the opportunity to make some extremely clutch team saves. Again, these are just what I have been using in my experience, so if you try to use other perks and they work well for you, by all means try whatever makes you the most comfortable. Now getting into the core setup of the build with the weapons and equipment. We're actually going to start with a throwable grenade, which for this build is going to be the throwing axes, and there's a few reasons for that. For one, it can trigger the vampire perk, which can help keep us healthy even from range if you use it on small enough enemies. Second, you can throw them in a very quick succession, which can help get some very strong burst damage against tough enemies. Lastly, the grenade type we use doesn't play a huge role in this build, so we use this more for convenience than anything else. If you want to substitute this out for something like the neurotoxin grenade for even more flame spreading power, you certainly can. Just keep in mind that you might be hurting your teammates a lot more using this one instead. Moving on to the actual weapons and their upgrades, our primary is of course the Crisper Flamethrower. This thing is the cornerstone of the build and our core damage output. It's perfect for our pyrotechnical needs and allows us to burn all of those around us very easily. For our purposes, we want to maximize the amount of burning damage that we can while sacrificing as little as possible. The first thing to talk about is the choice of overclock we are using, which is the aforementioned Face Melter. This thing is where our damage comes from and is what turns the flamethrower into a tool of destruction. It significantly increases the amount of burning damage we do and increases the flow rate, giving us a faster burning process. However, the tank size and max reach of the flames are significantly reduced, so we want to try to maximize the extra damage and try to mitigate the drawbacks as much as we can. To accomplish that, in the first tier I went with high capacity tanks to help offset the lower tank capacity. You could go with the better range to help offset that if you want, but for our build we want to get as much damage out as possible before reloading, and it also assists with other mods that we have as well. Moving on to the second tier, I chose triple filtered fuel to further increase our heat generation purposes. It synergizes very well with Face Melter and can cause burning effects to be applied almost instantly. The third and fourth tier I actually chose the same option, that being the more fuel mod for increased ammo reserves. We're not really concerned with slowing down or applying fear effects to targets as much as we are just dealing insane raw damage. If you wanted to, you could replace tier 4 with sticky flame duration, but in my experiences, having the extra ammo really helps to keep you well sustained and not have to call resupply pods too often. Then lastly, in the fifth tier, we have Heat Radiance. This makes the build insanely strong, as it applies more heat to more enemies as you stay close to them, and it also synergizes well with Face Melter. This is the main reason why we didn't choose the extra range in the first tier, because we want to keep in close range in order to gain the maximum benefits of this mod choice. Moving over to the Wave Cooker, our main goal with this weapon is to be able to handle those long-range encounters that the flamethrower can't get to, as well as further improve the flamethrower's burning capabilities and cause even more damage. First, talking about the overclock choice, I decided to go with Blistering Necrosis. This gives the weapon a chance to create a weak point whenever it hits the target at the cost of worse heat management. This can make your damage insane and give random huge bursts of damage by creating weak points, and then damaging said weak points for even more damage. An overclock for this weapon is not required, however, and if you don't have one, it can still perform just fine. The first tier, I actually wanted the extra ammo despite the other two options being very good. We're not too concerned about the direct damage this weapon puts out as much as the ways that it increases the damage you do to targets with flames, and we need as much ammo as possible to achieve this. On that note, in the second tier I went with Thermoelectric Cooler to try to offset the worse heat management that Blistering Necrosis gives us as best I can. The third tier is where we get the first major upgrade choice with the Temperature Amplifier. Essentially what this does is when you hit an enemy that is burning, it deals burning damage in an AoE around the target while extending the duration of the burn. This is insane at dealing good burst damage, especially if you have a weak point applied to the target with Blistering Necrosis. Whether for single target or swarm control, this choice can help do insane damage. The fourth tier is really up to you, because we don't really use the alternate firing mode too much with this build, so I just have the power supply overdrive option to give some extra fast damage if we do need it. Finally, in the last tier, we went with the Exothermic Reactor for even more elemental damage. Essentially what this does is whenever you hit a burning enemy with this weapon, it has a chance to consume the burning effect and set the enemy's temperature back to 0 and causing a huge amount of damage. Lastly, briefly going over the upgrades for the rest of the driller's equipment. For the Satchel charge, first I went with the bigger charge in the first tier for more damage output. We primarily use these for bunker creation or heavy burst damage on bosses or tough enemies, so the extra damage is very welcome. The second tier only gives us the kill switch option, so that's what we took. Tier 3 we took the extra charge just to give us more uses of the equipment, but you could go with the volatile compound if you want. Finally, in the last tier we took Rock Mover just to expand the digging area. We take this mainly to make the bunker production easier, but if you want to use the more aggressive style, then you could use the Concussive Blast for more control. For the drills, we have very simple choices for upgrades. In both the first and fourth tier, we took extra fuel to give us more drilling power. Magnetic Refrigeration in Tier 2 for quicker cooldown, and Supercharged Motor is the only option in Tier 3. Finally, for our armor rig, we have a pretty standard setup. We have the Improved Generator at Tier 1 to get our shields back faster, Healthy in Tier 2 to make us more durable, Hazmat System is the only Tier 3 option, and lastly, Breathing Room in Tier 4 to help us in a pinch if we do go down. So giving my final thoughts on this build, first and foremost, it is insanely fun to just disintegrate everything around you in a cloud of ash. The act of sweeping these destructive flames through entire hordes of enemy bugs and seeing them all go poof just never gets old to me. In terms of effectiveness, obviously this build can do wonders at dealing with things like Praetorians or Dreadnoughts, or really anything big and nasty. The amount of raw damage coupled with the multiplicative properties of the Wave Cooker's weak points can let you get off some absolutely wild numbers. The only real thing to worry about with this build is friendly fire, which is kind of the case for all driller builds. However, if you simply stay conscientious about where your allies are in relation to you and be disciplined with your fire, no pun intended, you can mitigate the risk of team damage and let loose with this insane flame-powered build. Well, there you have the Pyromaniac build for the driller to help you live out your pyrotechnical fantasies. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and are excited to see more build videos in the future, as I had a lot of fun making this one. If you guys want to see more new player focused builds or more advanced ones involving more overclocks at higher level strats, let me know down in the comments. Anyway, I hope you guys found this video helpful. Please be sure to give it a like because it tells me what types of videos you guys want to see. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time for another video.